Hi everybody, and welcome to First Chapter Friday. This is our first chapter book today. It is called Gooney Bird is So Absurd by Lois Lowry. It's also illustrated by Mitty Thomas. There's a few illustrations. It's more of a chapter book, so there's definitely less than a regular picture book. So we are going to read the first chapter of this, and this is actually a series, so we have many of these books. These books are actually pretty old depending on when you read them. But this is a newer copy of our Lois Lowry book, but there are definitely ones that are much older than this one. So, Chapter 1. Mr. Leroy's voice crackled through the intercom, speaking after a fifth grader named Henry Newmeyer had led the entire school in the Pledge of Allegiance. "This is your principal, Mr. Leroy," he said, and Mrs. Pidgeonton's second graders all laughed. They knew he was their principal. He didn't need to tell them. It wasn't like the day in October when Gooney Bird Green had appeared in their classroom for the first time and said, "I'm your new student." She needed to explain that because nobody had a clue who she was. And she had arrived wearing pajamas and cowboy boots, which made her somewhat mysterious. But everyone already knew who Mr. Leroy was. He was the Water Tower Elementary principal, and he was the best principal the children thought in the world. He was smart and funny, and he wore the most interesting neckties, except for the blue striped one. He had explained that his wife's mother had given him the blue striped one for his birthday, so he felt that he had to wear it now and then. He really thought it was a boring necktie, but if they ever met his mother-in-law, they should not tell her that he thought that. "I just want to alert you that all to the weather forecast," Mr. Leroy's voice continued through the intercom. "I guess we shouldn't be surprised since it's January, but the prediction is for snow tomorrow. Walkers, be sure to wear warm boots and mittens," he said. "That's me," Ben announced from his desk. "I'm a walker. I'm wearing my LLB boots tomorrow." "Me too," Nicholas chimed in. "I'm a walker too." "And bus people?" Mr. Leroy went on. "Me," Kiko said in her very quiet voice. "And me," Chelsea announced. "I got on bus 11 at the corner of Cherry Street." "Be sure to be extra well behaved on the bus," Mr. Leroy reminded them, "because the driving might be difficult in the snow. We want all our drivers to pay careful attention to the slippery roads, not to children who might be noisy or wiggly." "That's you, Malcolm," someone called out. Malcolm grinned. It was true. He did have trouble sitting still. He was wiggling back and forth in his seat at the very moment. "Of course," Mr. Leroy continued, "if there is a lot of snow, you know what that means." "Snow day!" the children all called out. "Snow day! Okay!" Tyrone shouted. "Snow day!" Snow day, Mr. Leroy said, like an echo, even though he couldn't hear Mrs. Pidgeonton's classroom from his office. "But let's hope not. We all have lots of schoolwork to get done, don't we? Now," he added, "some of you have noticed that I'm wearing my reptile tie this morning." Miss Pidgeonton laughs. "Yes, he is," she said. "I saw it when I was having coffee in the teacher's lounge. It gives me the creeps." "I love that one," Beanie said. "It has an iguanas on it and everything. Komodo dragons," Barry added. "Ugh, gross," murmured Kiko, who hated anything she might possibly find slimy. "Shh," Mrs. Pidgeonton said, still laughing. She pointed to the speaker and reminded them to keep listening to the principal's voice. "So I'll sign off by saying, see you later." "Alligator," the second graders called out as the intercom went silent. Throughout the school, each class said alligator, and then Watertown Elementary School fell silent as the teachers and children began their day. "Well, class," Miss Pidgeonton said, "as you all know, I begin each morning by Mrs. Pidgeonton, Mrs. Pidgeonton." Barry Tuckerman was halfway out of his seat, waving his hand in the air. Miss Pidgeonton sighed. "What is it, Barry?" she asked. "Look at what Gooney Bird's wearing," Barry said loudly and pointed toward the desk of where Gooney Bird Green had just opened her spelling book. All the children giggled. They frequently giggled at Gooney Bird's outfits, ever since her first day as a new student, when she had worn pajamas to school. They had been amazed and astonished and amused and awed at the things she decided to wear. A ballet tutu sometimes, dangly rhinestone earrings once, though she took it off when her earlobes began to ache, hiking boots with an the pinafore sandals with unmatched knee socks. Today, Gooney Bird was wearing an oversized tie-dyed sweatshirt. She had worn the particular shirt to school before, so it wasn't unusual. But today she had something on her head, a sort of pale green helmet with ruffles and 2 holes through which her red ponytail sticked out. Gooney Bird looked up when she heard the giggles. "What?" she said. "I'm trying to study for the spelling test. I can never remember whether it's an A or an E in separate." "We were just noticing your headpiece," Miss Pigeonton commented. "Yes, it's my 2-ponytail hat. On days when I have just 1 ponytail, I wear a baseball cap with my 1 ponytail sticking through the hole in the back. But this morning I was brushing my teeth when I looked in the bathroom mirror, and I said to myself, 'Gooney Bird, I do believe today is a 2-ponytail day.'" "I've seen you with your baseball cap on, Gooney Bird," Miss Pigeonton said, "but never with this 2-ponytail hat before." "It's brand new." Gooney Bird turned her head to give the teacher a side view of the pale green ruffles and the ponytail holes. "Do you like it?" "Well, it's unusual," Miss Pigeonton replied. "I'll say that for it." "It's underpants!" Chelsea shrieked. The entire class roared with laughter. Gooney Bird sighed. She waited patiently until the class became quiet again. Then she said, "Chelsea, Chelsea, Chelsea, whatever am I going to do with you? You know what that word does to this class. Remember when we were writing stories and I explained to you that you could always get a laugh with armpit or belly button or underpants? But that's a cheap laugh." She looked back at her spelling book. "It's an A. I have to remember that. Desperate has an E, but separate has an A. It's very confusing." "My mom and dad are separated," Tricia said with a sigh, "and it's very confusing because I live in 2 houses, and sometimes my crayons are in one house, but my coloring book is in the other." "My mom and dad are desperate," Malcolm said, "because they had triplets." The class laughed. They all know about the commotion the triplets' babies were causing in Malcolm's family. "I see London, I see France," Ben called in a sing-songing voice. "I see Goonies." "Enough," announced Miss Pigeonton. She glanced suddenly at Tyrone. "Tyrone, what do I see in your hand?" Tyrone put on his "Who, me? I'm very innocent" face. Mrs. Pigeonton went to his desk and reached out her hand. "You know the rules, Tyrone," she said, and he handed her the small cell phone. "It's for emergencies," he said defensively. "And what sort of emergency do you anticipate?" A bear may be coming into the classroom." "A bear?" murmured all the second graders. "In come a bear, but Tyrone don't care. When the kids all yell, he just dial his cell." Miss Pigeonton, who usually enjoyed Tyrone's raps, glared at him and dropped the cell phone into the top drawer of her desk. "As I was about to say, I usually begin each morning reading a poem." "Oh, I love when you do that. I love poemeth," Felicia Ann said. Her top front teeth were slowly coming in, and she had a gap there that made it hard for her to say an S. "That was a poem I was saying," Ben pointed out. "France rhymes with—" Miss Pigeonton strode to his desk and clamped a hand on his shoulder. "And this morning," she continued, still with her restraining hand on Ben, but smiling at Felicia Ann, "I had chosen a winter poem to read. But then suddenly, when Mr. Leroy was talking over the intercom about a snowstorm on the way, Tyrone, you—" She looked over at Tyrone, who was busy folding a piece of paper into a cootie catcher. He glanced up at the sound of his name. "Who, me? I ain't did nothing." Then he corrected himself. "Anything, I meant. I didn't do anything." Mrs. Pigeonton laughed. "It wasn't anything you did, it was what you said. You said—" She looked around at the children. "Anyone remember?" Tyrone said, "Snow day." "Okay," several children called. "Snow day. Okay, that's what he said." Mrs. Pigeonton nodded, and it occurred to me that Tyrone had created our morning poem with just those 3 words. The class fell silent. They looked at her. Beanie raised her hand. When the teacher nodded at her, she said with a frown, "It can't be a poem. It's too short." There are no rules about how long a poem should be, Mrs. Pigeonton said. It only has to be long enough to say what you want it to say. And here is what Tyrone wanted to say. She went to the board carefully in her neat printing. She wrote, "Snow day, okay." The class looked at the words. Malcolm, who could never remember to raise his hand, called, "No way!" With the eraser, Miss Pigeonton removed the words. She smiled. Then she wrote, "Snow day, no way." Malcolm read it and grinned. "I made a poem," he said in a surprised, proud voice. "I did mine already," Tyrone pointed out. "Snow day, okay." "Me too," said Malcolm. "Snow day, no way." "I have one," Kiko said, raising her hand. "Can I write mine on the board?" Mrs. Pigeonton gave her the chalk, and Kiko wrote, "Snow day, let's play." Next, Tricia wrote, "Snow day, hooray!" "I never knew a poem could be so little," Felicia Ann said in her soft, shy voice. "A poem can be whatever you make it be," Gooney Bird pointed out. She got up from her desk, took her turn at the board, and wrote, "Snow day, I'll say." Mrs. Pigeonton looked at Gooney Bird as she stood at the board with her 2 red ponytails protruding from the ruffled holes. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask this," she said. "I don't mean to get a cheap laugh, but Gooney Bird, are those underpants on your head?" Gooney Bird thought for a moment. Then she said in a patient voice, "Once it was underpants. Now it's a ponytail hat. It's like a poem. It can be whatever you want it to be. Actually," she went on, and reached for the ruffled fabric, "I'm going to take it off for now. The elastic hurts my forehead." "Gooney Bird," said Mrs. Pigeonton, with a smile, "you're so absurd." Gooney Bird grinned. "Aha! A poem!" she pointed out. "Look!" she said suddenly, turning toward the window. Outside she could see the first flakes of snow beginning to fall. So that is Lois Lowry's Gooney Bird is So Absurd. There are so many of these books in our library, so feel free to come grab one, and I will see you next week. Thanks so much. Bye.